Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to It Says What, where JW3 and Limud come together to bring you unexpected and poignant Jewish content from across the Jewish community every week before Shabbat. I am Joe Hyman, JW3's young adult programmer. As you've probably seen, our building is closed for now, sadly, but JW3 is very much open and we miss you all. For all of those who don't know us and haven't met us in person, JW3 is the cross-communal Jewish centre and arts and culture venue in London. We are partnering to bring you in this programme with Limud, a diverse and inclusive worldwide community of Jewish learning. Their largest event, Limud Festival, is hosted in the UK, and there are over 90 Limud communities across the world. This series will ask educators, artists and leaders from across the Jewish community in the UK and beyond to share a surprising piece of Jewish wisdom for our time. Each week we will post a beautifully designed source sheet that you can print at home with our educators' text and some questions to carry you into Shabbat. I'm delighted to welcome our very first It Says What guest, the illustrious Clive Lawton OBE, a British Jewish educator, broadcaster and writer who was one of the founders of Limud in 1980. He is a scholar in residence at JW3 and CEO of the Commonwealth Jewish Council. Clive is the embodiment of JW3 and Limud's values, and we couldn't think of a better person to kick this program off. Welcome, Clive. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks, Joe. All's good.
Where are you, Clive?
Well, I'm here in my home in Bristol. This is my study. And the bookshelves are not quite full because I haven't quite got myself organized, but they will be soon. And by the way, not only a founder of Limud, but also a founder of JW3. I was a founding trustee of JW3 right from its very inception through to the building opening. And I've been teaching there since it opened. So nice to be in both places at the same time by being in neither. What a great achievement.
Exactly. Yep. We're so glad to have you. Let's hear it. Let's hear this piece of Jewish wisdom that had you falling off your Bristol office chair.
Okay, well, I could have chosen any number of texts, I have to say. Lots came to mind, but this is the one I chose. And if anybody listening thinks that's idiosyncratic, I'm very proud of that because, that's what I like to be. This is a text from the Mishnah. People may be familiar with this bit of the Mishnah because it appears in many Sidurim, in many prayer books. So even though it's a bit of rabbinic writing from the 2nd century, this subsection proved to be so popular, this bit called the Pirkei Avot, which is badly translated as the ethics of the fathers. But anyway, it's appeared in many prayer books all through history. And as there's a widespread custom to read this on Shabbat afternoon in the summertime. So this is from chapter 5. It says 5 verse 6, but I think it's actually 5 verse 9, but let's not worry about that. And it says this. I'm not going to read the Hebrew, but anybody who wants to check the Hebrew can do so as we go. 10 things were created on the eve of Shabbat at twilight, and these are they. 1, the mouth of the earth. 2, the mouth of the well. 3, the mouth of the donkey. 4, the rainbow. 5, the manna. 6, the staff of Moses. 7, the shamir. 8, the letters. 9, the writing. 10, and the tablets. And then it goes on to say, but we don't need to pay too much time on that. And some say also the demons, the grave of Moses, the ram of Abraham our father, and some say, and also tongs made with tongs. Now, what's this all about? First of all, anybody who keeps Shabbat, scrupulously worrying about the beginning of it at precisely 3:47 or 7:59 or whatever it might be, will know it doesn't matter what time Shabbat comes in, whether it's midwinter and early or midsummer and late, but you're still running around like a nutcase in the last quarter of an hour going, oh no, I haven't done this, so I've got to put that right, or I haven't plugged in the so-and-so, or the Shabbos kettle's not on, or whatever. So I think it's perfectly natural for the rabbis to ask themselves this question about God at the time of creation. God has made the world in 6 days. As we know, he's about to rest. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to go, well, and what was it that God was running around at the last minute going, oh, no, I've just got the last few things I must do before I rest. And they proposed that the things that God made at twilight, just before Shabbat came in, that primordial resting on the seventh day, were these 10 things that they list. And these 10 things are miraculous items that appear in the Torah. At the mouth of the earth, there's a story in the Torah that tells us of some people that rebelled against Moshe. And Moshe confronts them, and God clearly endorses Moshe's leadership by the rather drastic manner. They didn't have general elections in those days, by the rather drastic manner of swallowing them up into the earth. So the mouth of the earth, this dramatic, exceptional, miraculous earthquake. The earth opens itself up and swallows the rebels. The mouth of the well. This almost certainly, there are two wells that miraculously appear, but this almost certainly relates to the well that followed the Israelites, according to the Midrash, according to the teaching, that followed the Israelites around, giving them water. My own preference, I have to say, is that I think it's not a Midrashic well. I think it's a Torah well, the mouth of the well that appears to Hagar and Ishmael when Abraham sends them out of his home at the bidding of Sarah, and they despair of their lives, and then a well miraculously appears to them. But either way, anyway, a miraculous well. The mouth of the donkey. This is the really, truly weird story of Balaam's donkey. Balaam was a non-Jewish prophet who was paid by the king of the Amalekites to curse the Israelites. And he knows he can't do it because the Israelites are the people of God, and God has blessed them, so he can't curse them. But nevertheless, he clearly wants the fee. And so he sets off on his donkey, and God sends an angel to confront the donkey. And of course, Balaam's got so many dollar signs in his eyes, he can't see the angel. But the donkey, who's smarter than Balaam at this moment, can. And so the donkey comes to a halt. And Balaam, as you do when you're sitting on a donkey, beats the donkey 3 times. And finally, the donkey turns to Balaam and goes, will you pack that in? Can't you see what's going on here? So a miraculous speaking donkey. The rainbow, of course, that appears following the flood. The manna we know about in the wilderness, and miraculous food. The staff of Moses. This is Moses' stick, which does all kinds of miraculous things. Not least, it turns into a serpent and swallows up all the serpents that the Egyptian magicians could produce. It also splits the sea when he holds it out over the sea, and so on and so forth. The shamir, now this is an odd little creature, again, this is midrashic, that in order to break up the stones in preparation for creating the temple, there was a general principle that you shouldn't bring metal, which is a warlike material. You shouldn't bring that in making the temple, which is supposed to be a place of peace. And so the rabbis posit that there was a worm that could eat its way through the stone, and they use these worms. I mean, quite how you guide it through so it eats its way in the direction that you want, I don't know. But nevertheless, there's this miraculous shamir. The letters. This refers to the letters in the 2 tablets of stone, which were miraculously engraved by God onto the 2 tablets of stone. And the writing. This refers to the miraculous fact that the rabbis assert that whichever way round you read the tablets, whether you read them from the front or the back, you didn't end up with a mirror image. They somehow miraculously turned out to face forwards in both directions. That doesn't make any sense. And the tablets themselves, again, which were hewn out of the rock by God. The second set of tablets were hewn out of the rock by Moses, but the first set by God. And that last little bit is also kind of miraculous, odd things. The demons, I don't think anybody's taken them too seriously for quite a long time. The grave of Moses, which of course was not prepared by anybody. It was made by God, and nobody knows where it is, and so on. The ram of Abraham, that's the one that appears at the binding of Isaac. Miraculously, just there's a ram suddenly there. And also this lovely thing, some also say tongs made with tongs. I mean, you know, how do you make a metal object in fire without having a metal object to hold the object in the fire? So where do the original tongs come from that you could use to make a metal object? So you might like to think that one through on Shabbat. Anyway, so what we've got here are miraculous objects. The rabbis say that God created these at twilight. Now, there's no indication of this in the Torah at all. You know, what makes them think about this? Why do they do it? To my own mind, this is the rabbis determinedly trying to rationalize miracles. Why should they do that? I mean, some people are awestruck by the possibility of miracles. They like the idea that God intervenes and does miraculous things. God can suddenly come down and save us or whip us up into heaven or do whatever. But the rabbis seem to be uncomfortable about this. And I think this is their intense desire to put everything into some kind of frame of order, of law, if you like. And they know that God created the world with a structure, with a system. That is, there's no point in grumbling about an earthquake or a volcano or stuff. Those things happen. They're part of the natural order of it. What you do is you try and avoid, you know, camping out on the side of an earthquake. You make sure you don't live in an earthquake area. You avoid volcanoes. You don't live where the drought is likely. You know, that you use your sense. There's no point in sitting there going, oh, I know we're in a drought-infested place, but God save us. And the answer is, well, don't be there then. This is how the natural order works. But then they're confronted with all these odd things that happen in the Torah, things that don't seem to work according to the natural order. And that's immediately awfully worrying because, you know, people have to come and go on their donkeys, or as we would in our cars or whatever. And if you expect the donkey to suddenly talk to you, remonstrate with you, what are you sitting on my back for? Imagine if your car said, I think you're driving too fast. I mean, that would be quite intimidating. We don't expect our cars to have a view on what we're doing. And manna is a nice idea, but if stuff started falling out of the heavens and dropping on our local trees, you know, what happens to the food industry? Well, we've already seen what's happening. So, you know, the staff of Moses turns into a snake, but I don't think any of us would want to do any gardening if we thought that your average, you know, stick could do that. So they seem to be saying that if you understood enough of how God created the world, then you would expect these things. They were there, they were built in. So, for example, we expect folk to look up in the sky and see Halley's Comet come whizzing round, and they go, it's a sign, it's a portent, it's an omen, something remarkable is going to happen, the king is going to die, you know, whatever it might be. But we now know that we can calculate when Halley's Comet is going to come by. And so we might go out into the garden and look out into the night sky and be awestruck by its appearance. There's no reason why not. But we're not any longer going to ascribe it to a miraculous event because we know how the system works. And so what the rabbis seem to say is that if you knew enough about how God created the world, you would expect Bilam's donkey to talk because it was built in. And the rainbow, well, we now understand how a rainbow works. It's built in. The system works that way. And they seem to be saying that all of these things are like that. I love the fact that the rabbis want to avoid this. I mean, I'm just amazed they include demons in this because it reminds us that the rabbis were perfectly subject to all the weird superstitions that were around at the time. But they didn't want to be subject to the paralysis that it could introduce, or indeed the handing over to God that the conviction of miracles can introduce, which is, we don't have to do this, we just wait for God to intervene. And they didn't want to do that. So I'm just awestruck by that. 2,000 years ago they were doing it, and still there are people nowadays who haven't caught up.
Thank you so much, Clive. That was really phenomenal and interesting. That text is one of my favorites, and I really enjoyed it when I first learned it when I was younger. It's a lot of fun to see all the different things that you pick up on through the Torah, and see how they ascribe them to being placed just before Shabbat in that very swiftly busy moment. I wanted to kick off some questions. If you'd like to ask a question to Clive, please comment on the live feed. There'll be an opportunity for me to share maybe 2 questions with Clive. If you have them, that would be great. And I want to just kick off and ask you, how do you feel that this text includes miracles that we've had in the Bible, but lots of people still see miracles as something that can happen in the present day? How do you think this text affects that view, the way we see miracles, especially right now in our current moment when I think people would appreciate some miracles?
Well, I think that they're offering us a template. I don't think they're saying this is the exhaustive list and there's nothing more. And that's why I think also they allow for that some say. You know, so some people think the ram of Abraham was like that, and some people think the tomb of Moses, and you might think that whatever you detect to be a miracle may be one of those things as well. I think that generally speaking, it is a rationalist text rather than an exhaustive list. They pick things which are pertinent to the Tanakh. So the Shamir, which talks about the creation of the temple, is the one of the examples that they give. That is, on the one hand, midrashic. That is, there's nothing formally written in the Bible about it. And secondly, it's the one that is not in the Torah. So that takes us into the later books of the Tanakh, into the books of the prophets, which talks about the creation, the building of the temple. But in every case, it seems to me that they're just giving us paradigms. They've selected a handful of things. They've indicated there are more things that might be included. And what they're trying to say is, guys, look, there's puzzling stuff. The tongs made of tongs. I love that. There's puzzling stuff. The world is a bit astonishing. It doesn't always work the way we expect it to. But you know, it's a system. This is not really startling. It's our ignorance that leads us to not know about this. And that, of course, not only empowers us, as it says, you know, your donkey is not going to talk to you unless it's built in. But it also says it's worth trying to think about the system. You're not supposed to fall back like an idiot and go, well, I don't know. I mean, it's God, isn't it? You're supposed to say, well, let's try and understand more. There's more here that meets the eye. If we only got to grips with how creation worked, how the system is set up, we'd understand so much more. Of course, this is the tremendously empowering aspect of Jewish thought. Muslims have had it, I think still have it as well, that God gave us our brains in order to figure out the world in which we live. And I think that's why Jews and Muslims were very hot on medicine. I think Muslims tended to fall away from that after a while, but Jews continued with it. The accusation that comes, I think, predominantly from the Christian world, that doing these kinds of things is the famous phrase, playing God. Why should you play God? Right? The accusation, for example, I don't know, artificial fertility strategies, you know, to try to enable people to have children who can't naturally. You know, that's playing God. Only God can enable you to have a child. Well, you go, oh, come on, that's tosh. What you do is you think it out and you figure out how the system works, and then you figure out what you can do, and then you intervene. And that's the basis of medicine, isn't it? And if you think that somehow or other that playing God is a kind of blasphemy, then you've got to fall back and go, well, I don't know, if that person is designed to die, then you must let them die. And if they miraculously survive, well, that's a miracle. And that's just not the Jewish way.
It's incredibly empowering to hear a text like this in this particular moment when we're relying on key workers, doctors, medical professionals to use that world, to use the world as a system to support and combat what's going on with coronavirus. I really think this is really particularly special at this time. Thank you. I'm just going to check if we have any questions from our live audience.
If you haven't got anything, let me just tell a joke, which I think is very pertinent. And it's pertinent to this, and it's pertinent to the situation in which we are.
Thank you.
But please, if somebody's got a question, do interrupt me. I'm going to get to the punchline, whatever happens, but do interrupt me. So it's about, you know, God has had enough of humanity. We're all being dreadful, and you know, he knows he promised that he wasn't going to flood the world after Noah and so on, but it's just too much. And so he decides finally he's had enough of humanity. He's going to destroy it. He can't put up with it any longer, and he's going to destroy it in a massive flood. But just to give us a bit more time, he decides to call the leaders of the great world religions together and give them 2 weeks' notice so that they can prepare their flocks for this impending catastrophe. So he calls them all together and he tells them, there's no point in arguing with me, don't pray for mercy. I've decided I am indeed going to destroy the world in a flood, but you've got 2 weeks so you can go back to your people and tell them, you know, that this is happening. So the leaders of the world's Christians get on the media and, you know, say to all the Christians of the world, guys, you know, we've been sinners, we've missed the point, we've failed to meet up to standards, God's had enough of us, and we must just try and repent and be ready for what salvation lies on the other side, and you know, pray and prepare. Muslims get on, you know, the world's media and they say, guys, you know, we've failed here, but the task for all Muslims is to submit to the will of Allah, and we must, you know, accept his decision. He is all just and he knows what he's doing. And the leaders of the world's Jews get on the television and go, guys, we've got 2 weeks to learn to live underwater. You know, that seems to me very pertinent to the current situation too, that when first hit with it, it's like, what do we do? We're all going to die. And then it's okay, come on, let's stop and think about this. What can we do? What's the strategy? And we just saw, you know, the British Health Secretary going, we've got to get ourselves together and make this happen. Interesting used the expression of, you know, the Dunkirk spirit, talking about the little boats and asking every little lab to try and, you know, tool itself up to do testing. That business of we can do this if we use our ingenuity. We can ameliorate, diminish, challenge these massive problems. We've got to use our sense. There's no point just kind of falling back, you know, devastated by the catastrophe. We've always got to regroup and rethink and figure out what to do. I think it's a moment for human ingenuity, resilience, tenacity, and determination, which are all qualities that the Jews have manifested over the centuries.
100%. Thank you. In the absence of any questions, I'm just going to thank Clive. This has been a really wonderful start to what I hope will be an incredible series. Clive has shown us that there's a power in looking back to texts and wisdom of our tradition, and seeing that there is that resilience, there is that thoughtfulness, and that look outward into the world of science and thought to support us back in our communities and in the world more generally. Thank you so much, Clive, for coming on to Zoom. Thank you to Limud for partnering with us. I really appreciate all of our viewers as well. Thank you, and looking forward to seeing you at our next ones. We've got an upcoming event at 3 o'clock if you want to tune in to JW3's Good News Hour with the Jewish News and Rachel Grunwald, our Director of Programming. And just Shabbat Shalom. Please see the source sheet that's shared on the Facebook page, and you can print this out and continue the conversation into your Shabbat. Thank you again, Clive.
Can I wish everybody Shabbat Shalom as well? And with Pesach coming up, I know this sounds very, very weird, but I hope it is truly liberating, however you do it.
Thank you so much, Clive. We really appreciate it. May everyone have a liberated Passover, Pesach, and Shabbat Shalom to you all. Thank you.